welcome to the Kerry Barrett Show live. It's fantastic to have you here. We have an amazing guest, Cam Beaudoin. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You got it. You got it.
We literally just went over this about 30 seconds ago. It's already escaped my mind. I appreciate that. Thank you. And you know what? As is wont to happen, as soon as I start a live stream, my Roomba, you know, those remote vacuum cleaners, has started to go off right outside my office door. So stand by. I'm going to shut the door. And now potentially the only thing that can bother us is my cat. But I think
well, I did a little dance. I kept the audience going. It's all good.
I appreciate that. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's a great Thursday here. Finally up here in Toronto. It's sunny. It's just like a great day. You know, when like everything's just the world is now getting warmer. It's just so much nicer here. So yeah. It
also brings the crazies out.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, for sure.
There's more crazy people out now that it's nice and warm. Anyway, no, you're right. I'm in New Jersey, so I'm a little bit further south than you, but it was 80 Fahrenheit where we were yesterday, and it's like finally the grass is green and the leaves are out, and it's lovely.
Yeah. It's such a great time of year, you know, favorite season.
Absolutely. So you know what? I'm going to do this show a little bit differently than the way that I normally do it. For those of you who are joining live, if you didn't know this, I repurposed this live stream for a podcast. It goes by the same name, The Kerry Barrett Show. It comes out, the recorded audio version only. It'll probably post 4 to 6 weeks from now. I can't remember exactly how many of these I have already produced, but I'm going to try and make this a little bit easier for my editor. So we've introduced Cam. I'm going to take a second to sort of rehack the show, and then we're going to start the podcast portion. But if you are joining us live, you still get the experience because you have the opportunity, of course, to ask questions of me or of Cam or join in the conversation, which is the bonus of doing this with a live element, because it means, you know, I love to interact with the audience. And I know, Cam, some of your audience is here as well. So if we haven't met, thank you for joining. Before we start and I'm putting it in air quotes, the podcast portion of the show, a reminder to go ahead and drop your questions and comments in the chat as we go through. And if we have some, I will save them for the end of the live stream and we can ask them there. Cam, you are the founder of The Frequent Speaker. Before we re-edit on the fly, tell the live stream audience a little bit about who you are. What you do.
Sure. So The Frequent Speaker Creative, it's a creative agency specifically for video creation of demo reels for professional speakers. That's it. There was a problem. I know we're going to get into the backstory and how it started and stuff like that in a little bit, but we create demo reels for 6- and 7-figure speakers who want to go out there. And if that's their main thing, if they're a speaker who all they want to do is get on stages and change the world, we're with them. If they're a founder who uses stage to get bigger deals or find investors, we're there to help them out too. If they're executives, I find a lot of executives are now starting to reach out because they want to grow their influence. What's the natural step after your CEO title? Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to start to grow that influence a little bit. Personal branding, we're with there too. So that's what we do.
Yeah, speaking reels are not just for the business owner or the founder or the entrepreneur. They're for executives as well, and they can pay fairly nicely. All right. With that said, we are going to officially begin the Kerry Barrett Show podcast version. So thank you for joining the Kerry Barrett Show. I'm your host, Kerry Barrett. Today we are talking with Cam Beaudoin. He's the founder of The Frequent Speaker, and his specialty, Cam, it's great to have you with us, is really creating that dynamic element that if you're new to the speaking world, you may not realize that you need, and that is the speaker demo reel. Now, I know all about these, Cam, because as a former newscaster, we also had to have demo reels. And basically, and the format is a little bit different, but the gist is they want to see what you look like, what you sound like, how you can engage an audience, not a live audience, obviously, in the news industry, but the speaker reel is similar. So take a moment to introduce yourself to our podcast audience, and then let's jump into exactly what a speaker reel is, why it's important, and how you get one done.
Sounds great. My name's Cam Beaudoin. I'm the owner of the Frequent Speaker Creative. And so, yeah, we just craft demo reels for speakers and anyone who is, putting themselves up on stage. And you said something really interesting there for, okay. Yeah, speakers aren't the only people who use these types of tools. It's very common in the world of acting. Also, comedians use it a lot too, right? When you want to get out there, when you want to start sending a calling card out to agencies or people who might want to bring you onto any kind of stage, this is that really valuable marketing asset that, like you said, shows who you are, shows how you interact with the crowd, tells a bit of your personal story too. And we're going to get into that, why that's really important in a minute. Yeah. But really, it's that pre-introduction to you. But there's one thing that I've discovered that a lot of speaker reels don't have, and it's the problem. Because without problem, anyone who's done sales before, I know you're relating to me right now. It's like, if there's no pain, there's no progress. So a lot of demo reels miss that problem, especially if you're a speaker. And this is what might be different between, in the acting world or the comedians or things like that. Mm-hmm. If there's no pain in, why are you up on stage? Like, how can your solution help solve my audience's problem? So there's a little bit of it to audience members here, right? Because you're trying to sell to the event coordinator, to the event planner. But the real person who's going to be listening is that audience member. So you got to be talking to both in that speaker reel.
Yeah, well, and you're showing your ability to work the stage, compel a crowd, but also your ability to teach this or share this unique perspective or value. And you're selling yourself to whoever is hiring you, but then the end user, of course, is the audience. So it is a little bit more complex. Let me start with asking you this question. Is it imperative that you have a speaking reel to get speaking gigs? And there might be a little bit of nuance in the answer, because maybe, you're starting out and you're talking to your local chamber of commerce. You probably don't need a speaking reel to do that, but dive into, how you figure out, whether you need one and how important it is to have one with certain endeavors or certain audiences that you're looking to court, if you will.
Sure. So remember the days when everyone used to have business cards around? And I'm going to parallel that. Like, who has business cards nowadays? If you go to an event and you're like, I got LinkedIn here, I'm just going to scan my LinkedIn code. Yeah. That's what you do. But remember that moment that you say, okay, it's time to go print out business cards, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's like when you sit down and say, like, okay, I guess if I'm going to take this seriously, I need a website, right? I guess it's time. Like, this is all along those same parallel veins. I've heard event planners, I've heard speaker coaches say that and it's not me who's saying, right? That the speaker reel is as important as a website, because when you're sending something to an event coordinator, event planner, and you're right, maybe your local chamber of commerce, or if you're self-hosting a lot of events, I know a lot of people just avoid the whole speaker reel in that scenario. If you're starting to reach bigger, if you want to say, okay, now my speaking fee is like 5,000, 9,000, 10,000 more, people are going to start expecting you to show up and show what you can do. And I'll let you know, nobody's watching your TED Talk. Like, they love having that like logo up on their speaker reel. Yeah. I definitely put it on there, but you can't be just sending people your TEDx talk, even though it's 12 to 16 minutes. Event planners they don't have enough time, right? And especially if you're cold pitching into an organization, you can't just say, well, I was on TEDx stage. Here's my TEDx talk. Go watch that and see what I can do. Because again, there's a little bit of sales flavor that needs to go in there as well. And that will help motivate people to kind of move forward with that. So I think it's as imperative as a website, because what does it do? It tells you and really sells you when you're sleeping.
You have a million. You gave me a million follow-up questions, by the way, in that answer. So I'm staggering them when they're going to fit in appropriately in this conversation. But you mentioned something that's really interesting. And part of that is, what goes into this. My question, I guess, is how important is it to show audience reaction? So I think when some people are thinking about putting together a speaker reel, they think it's totally focused on the speaker. Is it also important to showcase elements of how you interact with the audience, or to have testimonials from audience members, or to show, them, I don't know, laughing or smiling or doing something when you're up there talking?
Yeah, so I always include that in something called B-roll. So for anyone who's
Mhm.
listening, maybe isn't in the world of showbiz, I don't know. Is this showbiz? I don't know what we're calling it,
It,
but
it is. It
sure,
is.
showbiz. It's showbiz. So B-roll is all that extra stuff. It's you on the phone. It's those like slow-mo cuts that you kind of see in videos and stuff like that. It's anything that adds to the story, and you can just kind of keep it as simple as that. And I think for anyone who is out there doing a DIY, that's probably the hardest thing to find because nobody wants to sit there with their phone and say like, okay, this is me walking up on stage. That feels weird the first time you do it, but
Yeah.
once you kind of get into that habit, you're saying, I need this content because one day I might need it in a B-roll. I might need it for social media and all this kind of stuff. We're getting into the world of like, are you taking this? Is your speaking business a business or is it a hobby? So there's a little
Yeah.
bit of a distinction there. Also, that what I find. So what I like to let's go back a second when I said there needs to
Yeah.
be a problem because in your speaker reel, if you're not really clearly defining the problem that you solve way before they even introduce you, because when someone double clicks on that MP4 file and they're like, why am I watching this again? Right? Like that's the first question.
Yeah.
Like they better sell me in that first couple of seconds. That's why you got to start with a really powerful hook and then
Yeah.
like really amplify that problem. You got to get in there and why is this person listening to me? Like why should you listen to the rest of this 3-minute video? Like you really got to
Yeah.
sell that and front load that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What I've seen is a lot of speaker reels are made where you first introduce the speaker and it's all about the speaker for the first 3 minutes, and then you're like, what else? Okay, I don't know what this person solves. Like, I don't know what this person's going to do. They look like a great person, but is this really is this really solving a problem that my audience have? And I just want to take a quick pause and say, event coordinators, especially for larger events, they really know their audience. Like they really this is all they do. This is their bread and butter. You think of these big events like Collision Conference in Toronto. The event coordinators are planning that. Like they're planning their 2025 event right now. Collision hasn't even happened. It's in August, I think. It's in July
Yeah.
or August. So they're thinking of their 2025 event as they're leading up here. So they intimately know their audience and what their audience needs and what their audience wants. That's why they can charge $600, $700, $800 or thousands of dollars per ticket. You
Yeah.
think an event coordinator is not going to know their audience. So you've got to get in there really strong with really amplifying what the problem is you solve. And then later on, you position yourself as the solution to that
The
problem. And
solution.
that's kind of where the distinction kind of comes from are you just DIY? Are you just putting a bunch of clips together?
Yeah.
Or is this really is it like, are you trying to solve something? You're trying to go towards a destination.
I want to ask you a deeper question about DIY, but before I forget, so let me ask you a bit of a granular question then about how to begin that speaking reel. Are you opening with a huge wow moment from an event you have where you're on the stage? Maybe it's a big stage, there's a big audience, and you're having the audience and you are having a great moment, and it's just this sort of like boom, you land. And then do you go into maybe a little talking head video explaining what the problem is and how you help solve it, and then move into more of your speaking reel? Is there I guess really the question I'm asking here is there a format that you always follow, an equation? You start with this, then you move to this, and this is then the next 30 seconds, etc.
Yeah, I do. I have a blueprint and a roadmap. Actually, I will happily share this with the audience later on. I'm just going off this, so I've got something for the audience, anyone who's listening after this call. So I can send you
Awesome.
everyone the link for that, no problem.
Yeah.
But we always have to start with the really good. It's called the hook, and the
Mhm.
hooks are very well known in anyone who creates socials,
Yeah.
social posts, headlines, and that's actually the last thing that we create because we need to know all the clippings. And I do this because it's like I'm putting all the clippings on my desk, which obviously doesn't
Yeah.
happen, right? But I want to know what's out there first. And yes, it's to the people who have big stage performances. Yeah, maybe the hook is that really big bang, but I want to let everyone know that's not the only thing that you need to lead with. You can lead with something like a very personal story. Like what's the punchline of that story? You could go in there and ask a really specific question. And when I say the question, it's not a general thing like who wants to make more money, right? Like who's
Mhm.
going to say no to that, right? But what
Yeah.
if I said, what if you led something like, are you a person with a disability who is struggling with finding a career and are looking to bump up your career, right? Like you're very specifically getting a question answered, and it's okay to filter out people. I think that's one thing that a lot of speakers don't understand as well. You're trying to weed people out. You don't want to go speak at the wrong events because if you keep like spending time speaking for free or at the wrong events, you can waste a lot of time there too.
Oh
So
yeah.
start with something that's very big. So a big statistic is also a really good one. Shock the audience, right? That's a really, really good one. The punchline to a story, like I said before. What else we got here? A big promise, right? We get this a lot in YouTube videos. And I take a lot of inspiration from YouTube as well.
Yeah.
You go watch any big creator, like Mr. Beast. You think this guy is really going to go light a Ferrari on fire at the end of the video? Maybe. You don't know until you watch the whole video, right? And that's the hook. That's the hook he gets you with. So, and you have to master that first 7 seconds, because after 7 seconds, people are like, all right, what am I watching this for? Right? They're kind of getting tired of it.
Let me ask you then this. If somebody has not done a speaking gig, or they have only done maybe very small engagements, like a small room of people, can they still make a speaking reel? And if they can, what are your suggestions for doing that? And Absolutely. I know that there are platforms out there and opportunities. They have events where there's an auditorium full of people that they've hired to sit in the audience, and you can, but those are also, they can be quite costly. So if you're looking to sort of begin this process on your own and you don't have a lot of speaking engagements, can you make a reel? What do you suggest people do?
100%. So you've already kind of laid out the foundation of like what happens if you have the budget, you have the money, and you want to go out and you want that kind of big stage experience. Yes, there are organizations out there that you can pay to go step up on stage and talk for 10 minutes, and they'll record some really high quality footage of you in different angles. And you can use that and you can send it to me and we can create something. Option number 2, just go hire any videographer. You can go on Upwork, you can go on Facebook, and you can go find a local videographer who will come to your house, come to a location, come to your office, and go record you, and you just answer some interview questions. Simple as that. You've got a list of questions out there in front of you. You have a friend ask you some questions, and you answer as if you're really interested in it. Take a quick pause there, because I see this a lot. So a lot of speakers, if that's the angle you want to go, don't kind of look like this inside your camera. Say, oh yeah, I'm super passionate about changing people's lives. So you gotta kind of be engaged with that camera. Yeah. You gotta get your presence going up. Yeah. And now, if you don't have the budget to go hire a videographer, you don't want to do that. You can grab any, like the camera I'm using right now. This is $300, Sony ZV-1, right? This is a $300 camera. It records in 4K. Put yourself in front of a window. And again, get your friend to ask some questions, and you've got some nice natural lighting coming out there, and you're speaking directly to the camera. Get a good microphone, get a lapel mic, something like that, because that's all these videographers are using too. There's lots of options out there, nice audio quality, and you can start to build your content library. Like you can start to build it. And you want to make sure you tell a little bit of your story. You want to talk a little bit about how you can transform an audience. And you asked me earlier about testimonials. Text testimonials are good. Try saying that 10 times fast. Text testimonials are good. Video testimonials are better. But again, depending where your budget is, as long as you're kind of following that like problem first, position yourself as the solution, show the transformation. Like that is the general kind of organization that you want to put this reel in.
I love it. Who is qualified for speaking opportunities? How do you assess, listen, there's a lot of imposter syndrome going out there. Why would somebody listen to me? Who is qualified to speak?
Yeah. So everyone starts like that. I haven't met a single speaker who's out there who is just like, I'm worth, hold on. Actually, that's not true. I met one person once. He did one TED Talk and had 3 podcast episodes. And he said he's going to go charging $15,000 per speaking gig. Okay. And I was like, that's like anti-imposter syndrome, right? That's like overconfidence. Good for him though. Good for him. He went after what he wanted. But for the rest of the 99.9% of the world who says, I think I have a message to share, and I think there's somebody out there who might want to hear it. I think we all kind of start there. The first time you step up on stage, and that was my background. I did speaking on disability inclusion and accessibility. The first time I stepped up on stage, even though I'm pretty good on camera, I think I have a lot of energy on camera. I hosted a podcast and stuff like that. First time I stepped up on stage, I like shrunk into this tiny little wisp of a person saying, "Is anyone here?" Like it was such a different experience. Yeah. And the only way to get past that is through it. Like you got to just get up on more stages. So
100%. Okay. So let me ask you this. I know you have and you referenced it a little bit, and we're going to drop links to your resources in the show notes, and I'll put them in the chat if you're watching this on the live stream. But tell me a little bit about the speaker toolkit, what it is, what goes into it, how you use it to land more gigs even this year, because the speaker slots are still open.
Yep. Lots of, you know what? And that's one thing to remember. There's always more speaking opportunities than we think there are. And really, if you just take back to what is business, right? Like you are the product. And I've opened up opportunities for myself just by, like, if I wanted a logo from a company on my speaker reel or on my website, well, what am I doing? I'm pitching myself to that company and saying, hey, I would love to transform your team doing XYZ, full transparency. I'm doing this to practice, and you can, people want to learn. People really want to learn, and people really want to help. And I think we kind of get that idea that if I'm only going to make $7,000 for this gig, well, how would it transform your speaking career if you had like a Google logo on your website? Like that would probably change a lot. You could start to advertise that too. So it's not always monetary benefits. I want to remind everyone for that as well. But so your speaker toolkit should include a website, should include a demo reel or a speaker reel. And I'll be very interchangeable with that. Data shows that people recognize both. So speaker reel, speaker demo reel, stuff like that. And also a speaker media kit as well. So this is a supplement now to a good demo reel. In the past, if you can believe it, back in the days, people actually used to print out these documents and then hand it off to event coordinators and planners, like, this is me. And if you, like, actors still use this, I think. I don't know if they still print it out. I don't think anyone prints anything out anymore. But they have these, profiles, people who do models. They'll show their best shots kind of on a one sheet. And these are just examples of what types of styles that you have. This to me is a perfect complement to the speaker reel. Is any of those questions, any of those open loops that you create in the speaker reel, what I do is I say that's what the media kit answers. Like, so you'll have all your information, like your rates inside your media kit. You'll also have things like what topics you speak on, like very specifically, the packages, the programs, if you do consulting, like all those extra details, that's what you kind of throw in there. And that's kind of it. Like when you're thinking of the decision-making process, you don't really need to send out these massive abstracts, call for papers. You can kind of fill that information in as you go. But if you're just selling you really want to get people on the phone and then be prepared. Like, you've got all this information and you've got to learn some basic sales skills, but that's probably a little bit of a different conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. We're going to focus on the getting the gig to begin with, right? And putting together the right assets. So, well, actually, I'm going to ask a question that completely contradicts what I just said. How do you collect leads and referrals from the stage? So let's assume you do actually have the gig. Now, how do you leverage that gig for growth down the road?
Oh, that's an amazing question. So I always end my presentations with a nice big QR code on there, which leads to just a regular form. But you have to have some very specific questions around that. So a lead magnet is great. And for anyone who doesn't know, a lead magnet is that little like extra, if you want more information, I already kind of positioned it here, right? Like this is a freebie, but this is like, the blueprint to this. You want to kind of get people to answer a few questions before they go any further, because you never know who in the audience might lead you to a bigger opportunity. Right. You never really know. If they're in the audience, they're already probably a warm kind of group anyway, because why are they listening to a presentation if they're not interested in it? Right. Sure. Like, no one's being forced. If they look at the speakers on the roster and they say, man, how to earn $1 million for women in tech. Like, that's really boring, but I'm going to go anyway. Like, no one's saying that. They're like, I'm going to have early lunch, right? Like, that's how these events go. So if they're there, they're already somehow interested in it. So when you think of that audience member, like, what would add value to that presentation of yours? And maybe you're referencing something throughout your presentation. Maybe you want to, and I've even seen things like something as simple as like a workbook. Like, if you're talking about mental health, or like maybe you've just got a 4-page workbook that says, like, and it's just documenting what your mental health is over the next week. Some of the questions that you'd want to ask before giving people that lead magnet would be something like, do you hire, or are you in charge of hiring speakers? Or over the past 6 months, how many speakers have been brought into your organization, right? So these are questions that are going to inform you on, okay, is this person actually a decision maker? Is this person actually somebody who can help me kind of bring forward? Because I've done speaking, and you get a lot of people who just talk to you and they have no real lead magnets. Like, they're not going to bring you any opportunities in the future. So
Yeah.
being strategic, being tactical about it, limit to about 5 questions, and then just give the lead magnet after that, and then follow up. That's the key. The key is we get a lot of emails, but we never follow up, right? So if there's somebody on there who looks like, yes, they hire, yes, they bring in speakers, yes, they've brought in a speaker. To me, it's the, have you hired speakers in the past? That's a big signal for me. It's like, well, if you've done it before, you're going to do it again, right? There's no one who just does anything one time. So those are the types of questions. I just follow up and be friendly. Just say like, hey, I noticed this and love to chat with you about that.
Is there a particular type of talk that you find is easier to pitch? So I've heard that, for example, it's much harder to pitch yourself as, let's say, a motivational or an inspirational speaker than it is someone with a business solution, to stay within the theme of what we're talking about. Is there truth to that?
Absolutely. Supply and demand. Like that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
If you go to any speaker bureau's website and you search up motivational speaker, like there's so many people who fall into that category.
Yeah.
But and these days, if you were to, AI is very hot. We all know that. Mental health also very, very hot right now. And this is a change from past couple of years where DEI was very, very popular. And now that's kind of taken a little bit of a backseat to AI these days. So not saying that you need to follow trends, but if you can somehow relate to what's important right now and what people are talking about, AI is just what's important. And unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, there's a lot of demand for AI speakers right now. That means that you can start to like bring AI into your conversation, doesn't it? Like there's opportunities there where you can say, well, maybe I speak on motivation, and maybe there's ways to motivate software developers who specialize in AI and machine learning. Like maybe that's a niche, like maybe that's something that you can focus in on. And when you solve a specific problem, back to what I said before, it's a lot easier to pitch yourself because you're not just another motivational speaker. It's like, yes, Slack, I know you have a team of developers who are probably stressed out because they're working, burnout. Maybe I can go help them out. Like I learned a little bit about AI. I know what machine learning specialists do a little bit. Let me go speak to them directly. And here's the transformation that we can talk about. That's a way easier conversation to have than I'm a generalist.
Yeah. You mentioned at the start of this conversation the importance of storytelling. We sort of just touched on it very superficially. Is it important to have some sort of story that goes along with the different elements, your pitch, for example, your talk itself, the reel that you're putting together? And how do you decipher what is the right story and how much of it to include in those different elements? It's a big question.
So I'm of two minds of this. So if you normally bring stories into your talks, right? So there's really two types of talks, right? There's like those inspirational talks and there's more informative talks. And I know those are two really big buckets and there's lots of nuance there. But, if you're somebody who likes to bring in your personal story, then that should really be in, everything that you do because you're going to bring it up, right? I recently was working with a speaker who he brings a lot of religious teachings into his talks. And he says, I don't really want to talk to people who are going to be offended by that. So it better be in my speaker reel. It's going to be in your speaker kit. It's better be on your website because those are all things that you kind of bring in. You don't want to blindside anybody. So is storytelling critical? Well, no, because again, let's go back to that AI motivational stuff. If you're there teaching people about the next level of machine learning, that's going to be really hard to bring in a story into that. Like, it's only, the conversation's maybe only 14 months old. And I know if you're tech listening to this, I know it's older than 14 months old, but that's when the rest of the world learned about it. Okay. Like let's chill out. I know 14 years. Okay. We can go back. Anyway. If you are a storyteller by nature, then that should come into the conversation, but you have to remember stories are what's memorable and stories make you relatable. So I always try and add some personal story, some personal touch into every demo reel that we create, because that's what's going to make that's just going to make you memorable. And remember, if you're not memorable, you're forgettable. And like that's really what it all comes down to. People are going to remember, who's that guy in a wheelchair who talked about AI? Like I don't remember his name, but that's the guy I want. Like, like that's what you're going to remember because you're talking about how you went into a wheel, you started having to use mobility devices, right? Like that's what people are going to remember. It's not there's another AI guy. Like that's just not what people remember.
Yeah. I want to ask you, and this is the follow-up from probably 15 minutes ago now. You mentioned TED Talks. And you
Hmm.
said, it's great to have it up there. Nobody's probably going to listen to it. It's very interesting. Your comment comes on the heels of a conversation I had with one of my clients just yesterday. I work with her on media training. We're prepping her for all of her media appearances, of which she has the number, and also focusing on her stagecraft for her speaking engagements. And I suggested that she create shorter versions of her talks for TED Talks. How much of a credibility boost does does having a TED Talk give you? How important is that as a credibility marker? And do you have any suggestions for people who feel entirely overwhelmed by the idea of trying to put together a TED Talk and get on a TED stage or a TEDx?
It's still super important. Okay, you know
Mhm.
what? Everyone recognizes the logo, and in my world, logos matter. Like they really, really matter. Like when you have that nice wall of logos, either on your website or on the speaker reel itself, it really makes a difference because that is social proof, right?
Yeah.
It shows that other people have vetted you. And by the way, yeah, that's the same thing for media appearances as well. I really try to leverage media appearances as much as possible in there
Yep.
too. So if you're able to get on morning television, ABC, like if you're brought in as an expert, you probably know the name, expert.
Like
Uh,
a subject matter expert or
yeah,
commentator
exactly.
or yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're brought in like that, then that's going to be a huge value add to your credibility because it just boosts. Because what are people saying? It's like having Facebook or Google on your resume if you're in tech. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, this person's already been vetted a few times from other
Yeah.
companies, so
Yep.
let's maybe bring them in. That you get that extra level. So that's exactly what TEDx is. It is still a stage that you need to compete for. There's limited amounts of seats or spaces, and so it's still incredibly valuable. So you have to remember that one thing. Like that's really what TEDx is all about. Like you should be able
Mhm.
to deliver one message, one thing, because you really only have 12 to 16 minutes. And I think we've all kind of seen those TED Talks, which are like, I don't know where this is going. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like some are just chaos and some are pitches. And then other ones are
All over
really
the
trying to
place.
move. Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are like, how
He
did this
may
get
not
through?
hit rock bottom, but he's going to beat the hell out of the sides on the way down.
And there's actually a really great book written by Chris Anderson about TED Talks of how to get on a TED stage. I don't know if maybe you've talked about that before. I've actually got it right here.
I
This is
have
a great
not talked about that book.
great resource for anyone who's interested in getting a TED Talk as well.
Mhm.
It just talks about kind of like what you can expect, what you should be thinking about, what are good stories to tell, it's worth the read if that's the future.
Yeah.
But let's go to the other side. Is it critical? No, because if you're someone who doesn't mind, like I know lots of speakers who are earning seven figure speakers who've never done a TED Talk, they've never done a Google Talk, and all they do is they pick up the phone and they grind. And then after
Yep.
they've met their target audience 100 times and the audience keeps calling them back every 2 to 5 years, that's called recurring income and you've got a business. This is a business. Like you have to think about it as a business.
Mhm.
It's not just like how can I show myself on stage? It's I am running a business and the product is me. That's it.
Yep. You can't dabble.
Yeah, exactly. Just get into it. Do both
Yeah.
feet.
Yep. I wish we had more time, Cam. We don't, but I do have two quick questions before we wrap things up. A key takeaway, whether it's the biggest mistake or advice you have for people who are looking to get into speaking in a bigger way, what would you say to them?
I think the thing is make excellence a habit.
Mhm.
And this is something that, we try to think like just going back to that comment that I just said. A lot of people start in speaking with smaller gigs. I'll get on some podcasts. I'll do these kind of like really small things. And you always have to be pushing up. At some point, you have to say to yourself, yeah, local chamber of commerces are not going to cut it anymore. So what does it take? What would it take to get to the regional? Okay, what would it take to get to the statewide? Like, where's the next level up? And you've got to start thinking about that always. And so, it's a business. It's a business, and you are the product. And I know a lot of people start off doing it on the side, but if you're always stuck in that cycle of, we'll pay for gas money, we'll $500 do it for you, and if you're not learning how to say no to those gigs at some point, the first no you say is the first time you're going to get money for it. And it's the funniest thing,
Yeah.
but make excellence a habit. Make that say like, okay, I watched my talk and I know that feels super uncomfortable, right? Like nobody wants to watch
It's the
themselves.
worst.
Oh, it's the worst. I know. We all do it. That's why we do it. We do it for all our clients. Like that's why that's the biggest pain point. So it's like you watch yourself, pretend you're a professional athlete. And at the very beginning, you got to watch yourself and say, I'm I'm saying a lot of ums and uhs. If you watch my podcast from 2 years ago, I'm full of ums and uhs. And now, because of watching my stupid podcasts, I'm like, okay, I can start to work these out. And then you start to build that out. So it's you're a professional athlete. It's just a different type of circumstance, a different type of audience. You
have to recognize that you're a performer in this case. You're a performer.
Yeah.
Speaking of ums, contagious. Thank you very much. If people are interested in working with you or learning a little bit more about you and what you do, or if there are some resources you'd like to make sure the audience has access to, where should they go? Where should they find you?
I'm always on LinkedIn. I post every day on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to DM me there. I would love to chat. Also go to thefrequentspeaker.com. And if anyone wants the blueprint to actually how I create it, like I follow this, my team follows this, you can just go to TFS, like The Frequent Speaker, tfs.ac. And I'm actually like, this is not really the amount. I'm not even asking for email, so I'm not even following my own advice. I just wanted this out because I post a lot of this content on LinkedIn anyways, so it seems kind of weird if I'm asking for it for free on one place and asking for emails on the other. Anyway, I just like giving out good information. So the exact blueprint on how to create the reels that I create for 6 and 7 figure speakers is right here, and tfs.ac, thefrequentspeaker.ac.
tfs.ac. We'll put that in the comments and we'll put that in the show notes. Cam, it was fantastic having you. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. You're awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been so great.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. We will see you back here, same time, same place next week. Have a good one.